Video game intro sequences are a pretty crazy concept to me. I mean, how does the player get to know the environment they're about to explore? How do they meet the characters, see the world, get introduced to the general themes, and arguably the most important of all, how do they learn the game's controls? The intro sequence can set the tone or mood of a game, and different game developers have approached this concept in many different ways. In this video, I'm going to be looking at some of the examples that truly stood out to me and were extremely memorable. Also, I'm going to be looking at more single-player, story-driven games, since most multiplayer games with an intro sequence either have a basic tutorial or just show the controls. Regardless, let's take a closer look at some of the best and some of my favorite video game intro sequences that effectively brought the player into the world while also effectively teaching them the controls in a memorable way. Also, if you haven't played any of these games yet, don't watch the video. I definitely want you to experience the intro sequence to these games on your own if you haven't done so and plan on doing so. And I also say some minor story spoilers for these games. Well, you've been warned. Alright, let's get into the video. The Last of Us intro sequence honestly deserves an Academy Award. You start off by playing as the main character Joel's daughter Sarah. Sarah wakes up in the middle of the night and starts calling for Joel because he hasn't come home. While doing so, she starts checking all around the house for him, and the game gives you prompts about how to move around, look in different directions, interact with objects, etc. After you learn the basic controls, Joel comes back and you start to get a taste of the game's environment. This game takes place in a post-apocalyptic America, but the intro sequence takes place right as the actual apocalypse starts. Like 90% of the game or so takes place 20 years after the intro sequence. By playing through the intro, you get to see the zombie apocalypse and its impact firsthand, as well as feel sympathy for Joel since his daughter Sarah dies at the end of the segment. This sets the story up in a crazy way, since we know the important parts of Joel's backstory and we know firsthand how brutal the apocalypse is. Additionally, the opening credits symbolize a virus spreading as well as giving important information about the Fireflies, the main group in The Last of Us. This intro also sets the dark tone and perfectly matches the general themes in the game. It's truly breathtaking. This game's intro starts with an opening cinematic featuring the G-Man from Half-Life 1 talking directly to the main protagonist, Gordon Freeman. He says some very unsettling things like,
"The right man in the wrong place can make all the difference in the world."
And,
"Wake up and smell the ashes."
By doing so, the developers are simultaneously creeping the players out while also confusing them. This cinematic stops and you realize that you're on a subway ride. The game also takes place in an alien-riddled world, and you start to realize this after you get off the subway. As soon as the cutscene stops, you really get a sense of the environment, and it's amazing. There are a bunch of people in gas masks telling you where to go, and it's just crazy. The game also teaches you movement controls during this segment, but the coolest thing is that the game essentially tells you that you can pick up and interact with most objects when a guard knocks over a soda can.
Dear Dr. Bree, why does the...
Also, after a little bit you see Barney from Half-Life 1, and you have to sneak around the city. This tells you that the guards are definitely not on your side, and it clearly establishes the city and government as the antagonists of the game. You also interact with the guy from earlier on the screen during the awesome teleportation sequence. It's sort of hard to explain, but this intro sequence is super crazy. The intro sequence in Majora's Mask is extremely cool. It starts directly after the events of Ocarina of Time when Link goes out looking for Navi. You see Skull Kid, the new antagonist, take your ocarina and steal your horse. Link has to follow him into this weird looking tunnel, and here's where you learn that Link is now capable of pulling off different acrobatic jumps. Link then falls in an awesome visual place with all different colors and character models. Link also turns into a Deku for this segment, so you get to mess around as Deku Link and learn its control scheme. Aside from the cool looking cutscenes, you may be saying that this intro seems relatively normal and nothing too outstanding. But the really cool part about this intro is the speculation surrounding it. When Link falls down in the tunnel, countless fan theorists think that Link died in this moment and that the game of Majora's Mask takes place in a purgatory of some sort. There's definitely other evidence in the game to back up this theory, but the fact that the intro to this game caused basically every Majora's Mask fan to turn into a Zelda conspiracy theorist is so crazy to me. After this moment, you speak to the happy masked salesman, who says some pretty unsettling things, and then you get to roam around Clocktown, which is the main hub in Majora's Mask. This allows you to meet some of the locals, get to know some of their schedules, and then when you finally knock the ocarina out of Skull Kid's hands and play the Song of Time, you turn back into normal Link. This intro shows how the mask mechanic works in Majora's Mask while also setting the dark tones in the game. It's super effective in pulling the player into the Zeldaverse. Uncharted 2 has a super unique intro sequence. The intro basically starts with you waking up right after a train crash. You have absolutely no idea how you got there or why every other survivor is mad at you, but you're just there. When the train is about to fall, you start to learn the basic climbing and shooting mechanics, which is pretty cool. After a little while, the game starts to show a couple of flashbacks. They start by showing a cutscene flashback which introduces some of the main characters, but then these flashbacks turn into gameplay sessions, which means that they're not flashbacks at all. The train section is actually a flash forward. That's right. The beginning of this game actually depicts the events that happen right in the middle of the story, so you have no idea how you ended up on this train, but then as you complete more and more of the game, it all starts to make sense. And sure enough, right in the middle of the game, you get in the train crash and end up right in the same spot. It's such a cool moment, finally realizing what happened and what put Nathan Drake in this situation, and the intro effectively sets the story up for this moment. The intro to Metroid Prime is super cool. You start with an opening cinematic for context, which consists of Samus landing on this weird looking space structure of some sort. You start to get a sense of the controls and general environment of Metroid Prime, then you get hit with the first boss fight against the Parasite Queen. After defeating her, you have to evacuate the base and everything starts falling. A timer starts, an alarm sounds, and it gets super hectic. During this section you meet Ridley for the first time, who's the main boss in Metroid Prime, and your suit gets downgraded. This is super important because the progression in Metroid Prime is heavily based on the abilities of your suit. So you start off with basic abilities in the intro and get a sense of how they work, like the grappling mechanic and Morph Ball for instance. But during the intro sequence, your suit gets downgraded and you can only do things in the basic moveset like shooting your blaster. This part of the game is awesome and iconic, and it really gives a sense of Metroid's progression, atmosphere, and controls.
I won!
Games that aren't single-player, story-driven games can also have awesome intros, and Mario Power Tennis is definitely one of these examples. Although the opening cinematic doesn't actually teach the controls in the game, it shows how much personality the Mario Tennis universe actually has. It starts off by showing Mario and Luigi defeating Wario and Waluigi in tennis, and then Wario and Waluigi start to get trained by Bowser in order to defeat them. By no means is this intro as complex as The Last of Us, for example, but it's super funny and charming. Some of the highlights include Wario and Waluigi vandalizing this poster, and the neat training segment with Bowser. It's all very lighthearted and not too deep, which is perfect because those adjectives also describe Mario Power Tennis as a whole. This intro perfectly shows what the game is all about and allows you to meet some of the characters, while also conveying to the player that this game is just plain old fun. I love when Nintendo does this kind of stuff. Now it's time to talk about my favorite intro sequence of them all. The introduction to Bioshock is absolutely crazy. You start off with a cutscene taking place on a plane, then the plane crashes right into the middle of the ocean. The fire leads you in the direction of a lighthouse, and by doing so, you learn the basic movement controls. As soon as you step foot in that lighthouse, this giant statue appears when all the lights turn on. It reads, "No gods or kings, only man." This place is creepy, mysterious, and you have no idea what's going on, until you step foot in the elevator. Now just see for yourself how crazy this intro is.
Rapture. City where the
artist would not fear the censor, where the scientist would not be bound by petty morality, where the great would not be constrained by the small. And with the sweat of your brow, Rapture can become your city as well.
The game effectively gives backstory and lore about what this mysterious city of Rapture is below the ocean and why it was made. It's also effectively showing off the game's gorgeous visuals and unique art style. The moment I stepped out of the submarine elevator thing, I was gone. But the craziest thing about the intro is the very beginning and its reference to the twist ending. That's right, the opening cinematic in this explains the entire twist ending if you look carefully enough, and that's just so cool to me. Keep in mind that this is only scratching the surface, and I didn't talk about games like the original Mario Bros. Because everyone has already talked about these games. But still, the importance of opening sequences in games tend to get understated in my opinion. They can either encourage players to stick around for a while in this universe, or make players question why they spent money on this game. I think through this video it is clear to see that a good game intro can go a long way, and that introductions in video games can help solidify that game's place in history. Thanks so much for watching the video, hope you enjoyed. Peace.